and welcome to Business First here on Heart and Soul Broadcasting Services. My name is Lynette Manzini. Join me every Monday, Wednesday and Friday as we talk all things business. The time 9 to 10 a.m. on www.HSTV.co.zw and Heart and Soul Zim Facebook page. Hello and a warm welcome to Heart and Soul Broadcasting Services. My name is Lynette Manzini. I would like to welcome everyone to this webinar that is presented to you by ZimInd in proud partnership with Nedbank. The topic of our webinar is Zimbabwe's economic recovery path, reforms, special drawing rights and priorities. And we have our special guest today, the Finance Minister, who is going to be talking to us about these important issues. I would like to quickly announce that our webinar is oversubscribed, and if you are having if you have people who are struggling to log in, please tell them to log in through our Facebook page, HSTV Facebook page, Heart and Soul Broadcasting Services, because we are oversubscribed. So Zimbabwe's economy was already facing challenges when the COVID-19 pandemic disrupted the world in 2020. Business has not been the same since then. The economic challenges that were faced by the Zimbabwean economy back then were further exacerbated by the negative impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. This led to shutting down of industries and job losses. Despite this gloomy picture, the Minister of Finance, the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund are optimistic that Zimbabwe is set for a rebound in 2021. In today's webinar rather, the minister talks to us about the recovery plan. What is it that the minister has in store for us? And how are we going to achieve the set targets? And how does this permeate to the ordinary man and woman on the street? Before we begin this discussion, this engagement, we want to commit this engagement into the Lord's hands. And I will call upon Unique Zimuto, the HSTV Programs Manager, to give us a word of prayer.
A very good morning to you. Let us pray. Dear God, as we come before your throne of mercy this morning, I would like to thank you for your grace and your mercy and your love. Help us to never take for granted the gift of life that you give us on a daily basis during such hard times. As I come before your throne of mercy, I commit this program into your hands. Dear God, as we speak about economic recovery, we ask for your wisdom, we ask for your guidance, and we pray for the minister, dear God, that you might bless him as he starts presenting on these issues, that you might give him the wisdom and the guidance. I put all the presenters into your hands this morning, that you might also bless them and guide them along the way, dear God. At the end of the day, may everything be done for the glory of your name, and may you raise up Zimbabwe to the country that you truly want it to be. Be with us and draw us closer to you. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.
Hello and a warm welcome. In case you're just joining us, this is HSTV Heart and Soul Broadcasting Services, and today is a beautiful Thursday, the 2nd of September 2021, and we are all gathered here to discuss the issue of the Zimbabwe's economic recovery. And thank you very much, Unique Zimuto, for that wonderful prayer. It is important for us to always commit our engagements to the Lord. At this moment in time, we are going to listen to a few words from the Managing Director of Nedbank, who is our proud sponsor, Dr. Sibongile Moyo.
Good morning, everyone, and a warm welcome to this important conversation on Zimbabwe's economic recovery path. A special and warm welcome to the guest speaker, who is the Minister of Finance and Economic Development, the Honorable Professor Mthuli Ncube, who is here to unpack this topic for us. Now, this discussion comes on the heels of positive GDP growth we're experiencing as a country ahead of our regional peers. We're seeing taming of inflation to some extent and increased local content with industry capacity utilization. So we're thrilled to have representation from our industrialists, from the capital markets, from the development economists, as well as the accounting professional body in order to bear in on this topic and provide perspective. The subject has generated significant interest from yourselves, and we appreciate your participation today. Many thanks to the Alpha Media Group and the Zimbabwe Independent for hosting this pertinent conversation and affording us the opportunity as Nedbank to partner in the delivery of this morning's event. Lynette, I'll hand back to you for the formal proceedings of the morning. Thank you.
So now we will move on to the CEO of Alpha Media Holdings, Kenya's Mafukidze, to introduce the Minister of Finance and Economic Development.
Good morning. Welcome, Lynette. Good morning to you. As usual, you're looking lovely. Morning, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me to embrace you all in today's exciting discussion around Zimbabwe's economic recovery path. Appreciation clearly goes to Nedbank for sponsoring this event. We also want to recognize our partners, the Zimbabwe Economic Society, who will unpack this technically for us and are joining us here. And of course, to our esteemed guests and delegates and our panelists who have made time to be with us today. I understand we also have my big brother, the Governor of the Reserve Bank, in the room. Thank you, Governor. And it's always a pleasure having you with us. Thank you for joining us. Lynette, today I've got the simplest of jobs. My job is to simply just introduce the man who really needs no introduction, the Minister of Finance and Economic Development, our keynote speaker, Honorable Professor Mthuli Ncube. Honorable Minister, welcome. We thank you for joining us, but more importantly, we thank you for stabilizing our economic heap. With a positive inflation outlook, increased forex receipts, a current account surplus, and a 7.8% projected growth, we certainly can see the shoots of economic recovery. And yes, Minister, with the NDS1 plan, we can now have the audacity to dream again, thanks to you and the partnership with the Reserve Bank for giving us the stability that we so wish for the country. So without further time, thank you again, Minister, and I would like you to come and address us on the virtual platform. And thank you for coming through. Thank you, Lynette.
Good morning. Minister needs just 2 more minutes.
And the weekly digest for a full month. Well, you can. And all you need to do is download the Newsday e-reader app on Google Play Store or scan the Newsday QR code in any of the AMH print publications and start enjoying the quality content. Usasarireyo, famba ne time, famba ne chokwadi, famba ne e-paper.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning, Honorable. How are you?
Very well. Thank you for inviting me to this session this morning. I'm really pleased to be interacting with everyone out there. I say good morning to you all.
Great morning, Minister, to you as well. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. I don't know how much time you've allocated me to speak. Is it 15 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, Kenyas?
Lynette, how long is it? Is it 20 minutes?
The Honorable, we have allocated him 20 minutes.
Oh, fantastic. That's just right. Colleagues, I will shoot. I think what you've asked me to talk about was generally the, I guess, state of the economy plus the reform agenda, and then the issue of special drawing rights, SDRs, and their proposed allocation. A great topic indeed. Colleagues, if I can just go back to October 2018, when we started the reform agenda for our great country, we said there are a few things that really need to be sorted out. One was for us to eliminate the twin deficit. The twin deficit of the budget deficit and also the current account deficit. And the third leg was then to reintroduce monetary policy as a macroeconomic tool in addition to fiscal policy, having sorted out fiscal policy in the first place. So the question is, how are we faring? How is it impacting the economy and the economy's outlook? Starting with the fiscal side, I'm pleased to say that really over the last 2.5 years, almost 3 years now, 3 years, we've done very well in my view in terms of the fiscal consolidation agenda. We have basically year in, year out in the last 3 years been able to balance the budget and in some cases record a bit of a positive surplus. But let's just say balance the budget, because that's really the aim. But just by doing that, then it means we've eliminated the capacity of the fiscal side to contribute to money and unnecessary money creation. Secondly, in so doing, we said, you know what, we also need to perhaps as fiscal authorities stop overusing the overdraft window at the central bank. That the fiscal side cannot use the central bank as a cash box to finance wages and so forth. You recall there was a time when actually government was paying wages from the use of the overdraft window. So we closed that window in the sense that we're just not using it at all. We're not borrowing from the central bank. So basically since 1 January 2019, Treasury has not borrowed a cent through that window, and I have no intention of doing so at least until the middle of 2023. So it's something that we have to maintain. Colleagues, I must say that there's also been a lot of fixing of the plumbing, I'm calling it the financial plumbing within government, how public finances are used internally, our systems, we've even created almost an internal audit unit within the Ministry of Finance to interact with all the other ministries. There's a lot of plumbing that we've fixed in terms of financial processes in line with the Public Finance Management Act. Now, transitioning then to the external balance, colleagues, you've been watching the numbers. Because of the currency reform agenda that we embarked on, we've been able now to improve the competitiveness of our export sector to a point where now we have serious import substitution. If you go into our shops, you'll find a good number of domestically made products. And there's been significant import substitution, and the numbers on capacity utilization speak for themselves. So again, we have a situation where the combination of export growth plus our record remittances now far dominate the outflows from imports. And again, we've reported a current account surplus to match the fiscal position. Now, turning to the monetary side, again, the introduction of our domestic currency has been very successful. The central bank has done a tremendous job in working with the Monetary Policy Committee, which is a critical institution in the management of our currency, to make sure that the monetary targeting remains on target, targeting largely reserve money with a target of 20% per quarter, and making sure that the liquidity and the framework is well followed. And the central bank has been also publishing the M0 position and also its balance sheet, some of the international requirements such as IMF. So all has really gone well in terms of normalizing things in our economy. The introduction of the auction again has been a tremendous success. Colleagues who have allocated quite a bit of resources to our productive sector. Companies have been able to access forex for retooling and also for sourcing critical raw material. We're very pleased with this. That it's been quite successful. Obviously, we continue to fine tune and so forth, but largely speaking, the tripartite of basically the fiscal consolidation, the position of the external sector in terms of external balances, as well as the monetary sector, that tripartite has delivered the stability that we've enjoyed so far, at least in the last 12 months or so. Now, if I now turn to the pandemic, and then I'll go back into the sectors. Again, I think it's fair to say we've done very well in managing the impact of the pandemic. Just the vaccine program alone has been well received, and we've been on point in terms of just streaking ahead, make sure that we can acquire that vaccine on a bilateral basis. We now have 12 million doses. We are one of the best performers in terms of vaccine acquisition and administration within the African continent, and we just have to keep going. So I urge everyone out there to get vaccinated. That's the silver bullet in terms of dealing with this pandemic. And again, in terms of SDRs, we're going to allocate some resources for acquiring more vaccines. And I'll come to that in a minute. So this is pleasing. Of course, we'll continue to respond with lockdowns and so forth, social distancing, masking, that still continues. But the vaccine being the silver bullet is something that we have to accelerate and keep leading the rest of the continent on. Looking at our sectors, colleagues, just in terms of how our reforms have worked, I'm going back there. In the agricultural sector, one thing that I think government has really worked hard on is to ensure that where we have to give inputs, let's say to the Fumvudza, our presidential input scheme program, which is a productive social protection program, we've done so on time. It's not good enough to have good rains if you're not going to distribute these inputs on time, but also it's not enough if you're not going to climate proof that agricultural process. And that's what Fumvudza has done to climate proof, basically our smallholder farming support program. And this is really commendable. We will also, on the commercial agriculture, which is the National Enhanced Productivity Program, NIPS, which is the successor to Command Agriculture. That again, in terms of financing, was sharing with the private sector. And I said so right at the beginning, that at the end of the day, we want agriculture to be financing to be shared with the private sector. And that's what has happened. So we see progress where farmers really go to banks, structure their own loans. The reforms also we have instituted in the agricultural sector financing program have also borne fruit. The banks are active now in supporting the program that is commercial in nature. But we as government as well have jacked up our systems in terms of supporting the productive social protection program from Fumvudza, or the Presidential Input Scheme program. We've also introduced a commodity exchange to make sure that the market over time sets the pace for prices and drives the price discovery process. So please, out there in the private sector, support the new commodity exchange is very, very critical. Looking at the mining sector, again, we're pleased that the commodity prices are holding up. And the Ministry of Mines have been driving hard in terms of bringing in new investors into the sector. And there really the issue has been, investing in the cadastral system so that we know who has what title in the sector and reduce any potential chaos in terms of ownership of property within the mining sector. So that's, again, moving forward in supporting that sector. Now, we've also launched the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange, colleagues, which is really targeting export-oriented companies, but largely is the mining sector. And I think one of the institutions, the unlisted mining companies will be listing soon, and we expect more companies to follow. So again, that Victoria Falls Stock Exchange is yet another reform innovation that's meant to support the process of financial deepening, giving more options to companies, more options to you in the private sector, but also more options to the private sector outside, the foreign investors, in terms of where to locate. Hope to see you take advantage of that offshore financial center in the Victoria Falls. And then moving on to the manufacturing sector, some of you operate in that sector, so you've seen again the numbers regarding the capacity utilization edging upwards, and it's likely due to the availability of foreign currency, the competitiveness of our currency, and industries retooling, and want to support the industry as much as possible in this endeavor to keep improving capacity utilization. I still need feedback from industry on whether the program that we started for employing more youth into the sector, using this tax rebate program called YETI, Youth Employment Tax Incentive Program, because we want to give you tax rebate for any members of the youth that you have employed into your companies in the last 12 months. If you're able to give us that information, please, you can come forward and claim your tax rebate. We're very serious about supporting the youth. But again, the domesticating value chains in the manufacturing sector is a key priority for government through the NDS1 program. The tourism sector has been, obviously hit hard by COVID. That's why I'm very keen to really continue with the 18 billion support program that was carved out for the tourism sector. That also includes tax rebates for domestic tourism right across a variety of services. I want to continue with that so that we continue to support that sector. It's really been hit hard. I could go on and into the other sectors, but maybe highlighted what we're doing in the infrastructure front. Ministry of Transport has been working hard, but overall supported by other parts of government to develop our roads. Is going well, frankly. That emergency road rehabilitation program is working well. I see Second Road now is being taken care of, and then other road infrastructure right across the country. And all of this is funded through government because we've been able to manage things properly. Over the years, we've had the resources that we can apply on infrastructure development. But then let me just leave the economy now and say, maybe just suffice to say that we expect our rate of growth of 7.8% to be realized this year. Now, let me then move on to the SDRs. On SDRs, we received about just below $1 billion equivalent in SDRs. And so as I speak, because we haven't used a cent at all, they just count as reserves. So in principle, we have about $1 billion that has come in, which is supporting the reserves and so forth. But as we draw down and as we use the monies, then obviously we use that on development. But whatever is unused still remains to be accounted for as part of the country's reserves. Now, so what are we going to use these for? We will target certain sectors, 4 areas that have been hit hard by COVID, which is the social sector, health, education, and I'll go back and elaborate. And then number 2, the productive sector, looking at agriculture, manufacturing, mining in the main, and then infrastructure development being the 3rd area, and then finally something held back to bolster our reserves and contingency funding resources. Let me go back to the beginning, looking at the social sector, which is been hit hard by COVID. Here in the health sector, we want to upgrade some of our major hospitals, especially the referral hospitals, central hospitals. Make sure they're properly revamped with new equipment, installed. Secondly, we want to buy more vaccines. So those are 2 critical areas. So it's hospitals, they're equipping them, plus acquiring more vaccines so that we make sure that the herd immunity is surely achieved. Then the education sector, which has also been hit hard, will also be supported. We're very keen to build new boarding schools in rural areas, at least one per province in the rural areas, so that it's easy for pupils to be in one place, be able to learn from one place, and so that should we have future pandemics, they are able to receive tuition from a boarding school environment. So I'm just highlighting an area that we need to deal with here, but it doesn't have to be boarding schools. It could be other areas that desperately need a school. We're mapping out those areas to see where best to use these SDRs, but building schools. Now, as we build the schools, they'll be equipped with power, with water, probably the two important things that are critical here, so that we can, have ICT connectivity, make sure there's water and sanitation to the best level possible. Then within the social sector, we also want to support the vulnerable, whether it's elderly, disabled, they need to be supported. But within that, we also want to be able to support the youth in some kind of cash for work programs. But any program that cushions what we consider to be vulnerable will also be supported. So that really completes the social sector. I now turn on to the productive sector, starting with agriculture. Agriculture, I want to support two areas. One is the creation of an export revolving fund to support the horticulture sector, floriculture, macadamia, and so forth, avocados, and so forth, blueberries, things like that. Anything in the horticultural sector that earns hard currency, especially, will be supported. This is a revolving fund, so we're not really spending money. We're going to structure a credit facility with some local and foreign banks. Also, it's a good way to work with some local banks as well. We have to crowd them in. And then these banks extend credit, lines of credit to the private sector to do what they do best. But the risk having been lowered through a cash cover from government from this SDR process. So that's a revolving fund which will keep going for several years. Now, then the next one is the irrigation sector that want to support some smallholder irrigation schemes or schemes that support the smallholder farmers. We've got several dams where the water needs to be evacuated. So we want to make sure that it gets to the farmers. So we'll be supporting the development of these irrigation schemes and climate-proof our agriculture. And then let me turn to the manufacturing sector. Here we're looking at supporting specific value chains, the cotton value chain, leather value chain, the pharmaceutical sector, as well as some aspects of agro-processing. Looking at the cotton value chain, the garment part of the value chain, in my view, is not strong enough. In fact, we should say it's missing. The cotton growing is working well. We are also able to do some, develop some, or rather make clothes and so forth. But the cloth is important. So if we can support the garment manufacturing missing a piece of the value chain, that would be fantastic. So we're looking at that. And again, this will be a revolving fund for retooling for that sector. The same applies to the pharmaceutical sector. Again, we want to support the sector as well as the leather industry value chain and the agro-processing. Now, I now turn on to the mining sector. We're very keen to support the small-scale miners, particularly the gold sector, where small-scale miners produce 60% of the gold that the country produces, and their biggest constraint is access to equipment. So if we're able to then come up again with a revolving fund, which will allow them to access this equipment which will be purchased, and again in terms of spatial distribution, we capacitate these gold centers that we're trying to create. All that will go a long way in supporting the small-scale farmers, miners, to do what they do best in terms of gold mining. I now turn to infrastructure. There are two aspects that the SDRs will be allocated towards. That is some critical road infrastructure that will change the landscape certain areas of the country, but also look at the housing sector. For the housing sector, we could invest in specific housing development projects, which we're looking into, but also in critical housing infrastructure, the bulk services on the back of which then private developers can then go ahead and do what they do, which is develop housing and real estate. So, and all of that again is we do that, we want to make use of the financial instruments that we've promoted through our reforms, such as real investment, real estate investment trusts, REITs, and other funding mechanisms which we are keen to develop as a way to develop our capital markets. So again, the housing sector will be supported. Maybe just a word on the energy sector. The energy sector tends to have, I think there's a lot of interest from the private sector directly, and we've seen a tremendous progress in the Wange area, in the coking coal producers who are digging for coking coal also end up producing thermal coal, which goes towards producing thermal energy, so electricity. So over time, we should see that energy gap being closed, but also we are going to be able to support the investors in the solar energy space. We are just about to conclude our framework for the solar energy sector, which includes various areas such as, for instance, the tariff regime, the hedging regime, so that those who lend us money are able to receive their payments and proceeds. So that currency hedging strategy is critical. It should be clear what it means for them before they invest. So we're busy fixing that framework, which will allow more people to come into the sector. But I don't think they need SDRs. They just need a good environment as investors into the energy sector, which is critical infrastructure. We've seen obviously good progress now on Wange 7 and 8 through a loan from the China Exim Bank and also India Exim Bank, looking at other aspects of energy. So there's adequate funding there. The issue is just support. We won't be applying SDRs as such in there. Now, finally, I said the fourth area is supporting our reserves. And I said that, look, before any SDRs are used, they are accounted for as reserves anyway. So at any point in time, we are supporting the reserves build-up agenda. But over time, we will obviously invest in these development projects only up to a point where then the remainder is kept behind in SDR form to bolster our reserves and any other contingency funding required for any from projects in future. So really that's I've just tried to paint a picture of the reform agenda, performance of the economy, the drivers for that performance, and then a picture of how we intend to use the SDRs. We formed an implementation committee, which I chaired. It involves the governor and the PS Finance, reporting to His Excellency on how these SDRs are being used. And I'll be reporting at least once a month to His Excellency as to how the progress on the use of these SDRs is going. The SDRs will be used transparently. They'll be used prudently. We will be accountable. I can assure you, colleagues, we are determined to do this. We've managed to manage things in terms of our budget very well every year, producing balanced budgets. So I don't see how on this occasion we suddenly those skills will desert us, and then we're unable to manage SDRs properly. So we'll be very accountable and make sure the public is constantly informed. And let me just end by saying I'm very bullish about the performance of the economy this year, and also the outlook for the rainy season. The 2022-2023 rainy season looks good. So again, if we do what we did last year, we should have a good output in the agricultural sector. And that really augurs well going forward. It means that even if we have a challenging 2023, 2024 or 24-25 season, at least we'll have some very good reserves in terms of food, which will reduce our import bill in those years if they turn out to be not so, good years. Let me stop here for now, and I'm sure there'll be a robust discussion. I thank you.
I was just, as I was listening, I am, you are very bullish, like you said, that we are going to attain that projected growth. And if I can steal the Reserve Bank governor's words from your presentation, it shows that we are staying on course. And the issue of capacity utilization of industry is a very important issue, and I'm happy that you also touched on that, and that has remained on your agenda. The small scale miners as well, they indeed supply 60% of the gold that is produced here in Zimbabwe, and it's important to assist them financially in regards to the various issues that they require. I also really appreciate you saying that you are going to be very accountable, and you are also going to be transparent in respect to the SRD, the special drawing rights. I think this is exactly what people want to hear, and I just hope that we are going to walk the talk. So at this moment in time, I want to give the opportunity to our panel discussants. I will begin with the president of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Zimbabwe, Mr. Tumai Mafunga. He is going to give us his response to the minister's presentation, and also have an opportunity to ask a question or two. Mr. Mafunga.
Right. Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, I can hear you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Minister, for that presentation. It is encouraging, some of the key positives that have come through from the government over the past couple of years. I can see, as you indicate, the continued investment in infrastructure, which I think in the long term will have quite some positive impact in terms of economic growth. I think in one of the statistics in the recent past, I did hear that 78% of GDP. I mean, our debt is at 78% of the GDP. There are, however, some matters that I would like you to comment on, and I think I'll go straight to the one which is a big elephant in the room regarding the issue of the exchange rate. And also the auction. I think it's fair to say that it has brought about quite some stability in terms of providing an avenue for a number of businesses to access foreign currency. However, it's also fact that it has created some arbitrage opportunities where obviously the disparities between the alternative market and the exchange rate on the auction rate have continued to increase. And I think one of my major concerns with that is these arbitrage opportunities create inefficiencies for businesses, and people then have, are focused more on obtaining an allocation to make profits as opposed to improving the efficiencies within businesses. And it would be good maybe at the end of my comments just to get your views around how we can bridge that specific gap. I am also of the view that wherever the alternative market is playing, I think it's significantly out of kilter and is not supported by the economic fundamentals on the ground. But I am also of the view that where the auction rate is at the moment may not also be representative of what one can define as fair. But that's my opinion. We also need to continuously incentivize exporters and those who are feeding into this auction. I think the reality is that you can have a situation where one can find a competitor, and the 85 in itself can be viewed as some form of tax for some of the businesses that are subject to liquidation. And so I think that follows into some of the matters that you spoke to. One of the areas I would also want you to comment on, Minister, is on the incentives that you push through, particularly on how you harness the diaspora. I think it's common knowledge that they are a fairly big contributor to the fiscus in terms of foreign currency. A personal worry for me outside of that is on the students. And I was happy to hear you talking about the schools, simply because I think over the past 2 years, we've had quite a significant impact on a number of students. And I think that impact will only be felt into the future in the absence of us putting in remedies that allow for us to deal with the gap created by closure as a result of COVID. I am encouraged that we continue to support, the gold sector, particularly the artisanal miners. But one of my major concerns there is how do we then focus on formalizing some of these informal markets so that we have a very steady revenue going through the fiscus in as far as support is concerned. Obviously, I have touched on a few issues, Minister, but I think the big one for me is really on the exchange rate, how we take away that arbitrage opportunity, and then we create an efficient market and an efficient system. And I know the governor has worked hard in terms with yourself, has worked hard in terms of creating this particular platform, and it's about how we then make it effective. But overall, very impressive targets, and I think it's clear that government is working towards a specific roadmap that will see us experiencing some growth into the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. At this moment in time, I'm going to call upon Chenai Moyo Mutamba Sere. She's a development economist. Could you kindly give us your response to the minister's presentation? And also, you can field a few questions. Your 5 minutes begins now.
Good morning. Thanks, Lynette, and good morning to all colleagues. So I think if I could just articulate my top 3 priorities based on what the minister's presentation has been, I would say that we need to focus solely on resilience. I think we need to take a view that we are not out of the COVID pandemic yet. We need to take a view that says we expect a 4th wave, certainly not in the distant future. And with that in mind, my top 3 priorities, I mean, why I say this is because if we focus solely on growth, we risk not achieving as good a return on our investment because of the pandemic. And so from that perspective, we must focus solely on resilience. And so when I look at education, which as the minister said, has been quite hard hit, we have a minority elite children who have had access to learning throughout the phase of the pandemic, throughout the lockdown and the restrictions. But we then have another majority who have not had access to learning. And as Tumai said, this has widened the inequality gap. From that perspective, I would say, as opposed to the boarding schools, which are a good idea on a normal day when we have business as usual, we need to focus on capacitating digital learning for both children and for the teachers, because that is where the gap is currently. Whether we are looking at rural settings, whether we're looking at peri-urban settings, let's try and ensure that children have got access to digital learning resources, because this is what will make the education sector resilient and reduce this widening of the inequality gaps that we're observing. My second priority is a focus on the informal sector, which to me appears a blind spot for both the Minister of Finance and the governor, if they would indulge me on that. This is the backbone of Zimbabwe. We know that more than 60% of adults do get their income from the informal sector. We know that nearly 90% of commercial activity does come from the informal sector or has some sort of significant touch point with the informal sector. How does this manifest? We see this the minute we open our lockdown restrictions, the black market exchange rate is up to 140. We see this when the June World Bank report says more than 49% of the population of Zimbabwe is living within the extreme poverty lines. So we know that this is because the informal sector has been hugely affected. We need to consider grants. We need to boost them so that as we return to normalcy, they're able to restart their businesses, they're able to re-engage in commercial activity as soon as possible. In addition to that, we need to facilitate an environment that will allow for this sector to continue even where potentially infection rates are increasing. So let's enable them to have safe working environments through PPE, through introduction of social distances within their environment, within their transport networks. I think this will be critical so that if we are in a position where infection rates start to increase, we do not go for an ultimate hard lockdown every time, because this, as we know, is damaging and has a huge socio-economic impact on our population. The third priority, and here I would completely concur with the minister's submissions, which is the health sector. We know that at the peak of the COVID pandemics, our hospitals simply cannot cope. Whether we're looking at our biggest state hospitals, such as Parenyatwa, we saw, I think it was back in March, when it came to a near complete halt, when the pandemic was at its peak. We know that rural district hospitals cannot cope with COVID. So we need to ensure that we do have safe COVID hubs within local communities that does reduce movement. You don't have to go to Harare when you're seriously ill with COVID. You can get the treatment and attention you need within your local community. In terms of the SDR and how we approach this from a monetary standpoint, I do like the thinking that this is a reserve. And I think in as much as possible, we need to retain this as a reserve. I will quote the finance minister in previous submissions where he has said the country is reporting a good bill of health. And from that perspective, let's look to our external position. Let's look to our balance of payments if we're reporting a surplus. Let's look even to liquidating some of our own reserve. Let's look at how best we can minimize the cost of capital, because the SDRs over time will incur an interest. So if we do revert them to usable currency, we will incur an interest. I know at the moment is at 0.05%, but as financial markets return to normalcy, that may well increase. And over time, that will be a significant cost of capital on the part of Zimbabwe. In terms of scrutiny, again, I applaud the minister for starting to think about how we can present transparency, because as we know, Zimbabwe does have a trust and a trust deficit in terms of how the national purse is spent. We're not only interested in understanding how the SDRs are apportioned, but where we've used them, let's also account for the budget relief areas that we have used.
If I can just interrupt, please round up in the next 40
seconds.
This is
my that was actually my last point. My next point was going to say I've finished. That's the last of my submissions. Thanks, Lynette.
Okay,
Thanks,
thank you very much. So we're just going to take a quick ad break as we wait for Tafadzwa Chinamo, Securities and Exchange Commission of Zimbabwe, Chief CEO, to give us his response. Please be on stand. Okay, Mr. Chinamo, can you please take the virtual podium and give us your response and a few questions?
Thank you, Lynette, and a very good morning to you all. I trust you can all hear me. And thank you, Minister, for your update on the economy. My reaction is really going to be on three areas that the Minister touched on. That is VFX, that's our exchange in Victoria Falls, also the commodity exchange and infrastructure. I'll just start with the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange. We've had a lot of comments on people saying that, is this not going to cannibalize the ZSC? Why are we setting this up? Is it necessary, and so forth? But one thing that you realize, and this comes from what the Minister was saying, is that I think the problem that we've had for more than a decade now, if not, definitely more than a decade, is that our businesses or the private sector has not been able to raise capital. And if you speak to any corporate today, they'll tell you that they find it futile to raise capital in local currency. So they would rather raise that money in hard currency. So VIC4 Stock Exchange essentially addresses that aspect of it, that we want a platform where the private sector can attract hard currency through issuance of securities. And so what you're going to see in years to come on the VIC4s is that sort of thing. And it just goes beyond also raising capital through issuance of shares. We're also looking at bonds. I know the Minister didn't touch on it now, but certainly there has been talk from government itself and other players that there's more than just one way for companies to raise capital. I think for many years, we've just looked at the equities market, but certainly bonds are a viable option. And there was also a point about the diaspora raised that how can you also engage them? When you speak to a lot of people who are living outside this country, they are interested in sending money home, in being a part of the development process of the country. And we believe that the right infrastructure in VIC4s, which give them those protections, is certainly a good start. I can also preempt that not very long from now, you are going to see more products being offered on that exchange in VicFours, and these are more retail-oriented products, which should attract the interest or the attention of the ordinary Zimbabwean with free funds. So I think it's like any new thing, it's going to take time, obviously, to get to full speed. But the fact that we've started it, I think that's important. And on that note, I would also say that the commodity exchange, I think the minister spoke about the need for the private sector to also be involved in the funding of agriculture. Well, a commodity exchange might not directly fund agriculture, but certainly it brings in the private sector directly in contact with the farmers. We have spoken about commodity exchanges for many, many years. And I think what ZMX did 2 weeks ago by launching that platform is a step in the right direction. Obviously, like any new thing, it's going to take time to gather speed. There needs to be a lot of education amongst our farmers, food processors, as well as the investments community to understand the mechanics of this and how everyone can then benefit. The moment that prices of commodities are publicly known and the trading of it is as open and transparent as we expect it to be through a commodity exchange, I think the interest also is going to grow, and the flow of capital to that sector, in my view, is also going to go up. And then the last point that I want to touch on, which the minister spoke about, was infrastructure. He spoke of REITs, real estate investment trusts. Here at the commission, we have already licensed 2. There's a 3rd one on the way. And essentially, for those who may not know, it's essentially a pooling arrangement where investors' money is pooled and deployed into a property investments. It could be to develop a new property, to renovate one. But essentially, the benefit for those investors is that through time, they will get regular cash flows from the rentals of that property. Why is this important? I think we've already seen the lack of investment in our CBD. A lot of businesses are, leaving the CBD for that very reason, and it's because of the lack of investment. So the institutions, and I'm looking here at mainly our insurance companies and pension funds, are very excited about this, are very interested in this. A lot of the pension funds that we have are not big enough on their own to undertake massive infrastructure projects. But through these REITs, you will certainly see in the next coming months more and more of developments going up with this pooling arrangement. So I just like to say that it's not going to be a smooth road, obviously, because of all the issues that the minister spoke about, exchange rates and and things like that. But I think what's important is the fact that we've started doing these things. And what just needs to be done is to emphasize on the education and make people aware of how all of these mechanics work, give them the confidence to assure them that these investments are well regulated and there is a high level of security when they take part in these initiatives. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Chinamalo. Thank you.
Every Zimbabwean wants their country to return to its former glory, and we believe that we have a role to play in doing that. So we'll be speaking to different Zimbabweans from different facets of life to share their views of what it will take to get Zimbabwe to rebound. The Rebound series comes to you every Friday between 5 and 6 p.m. on the Heart and Soul digital platforms. Join me, Farai Mwakutuya, for those incisive discussions.
Professor Ncube, if I can bring you back in, you have heard the industry's response and their questions that they have fielded to you. At this moment in time, I give you 15 minutes to respond to them. Before you come in, if you are joining us via Zoom, kindly post your questions in the chat box. And if you are joining us via Facebook, you can post your questions there. And if we have an opportunity, we will ask the Finance Minister. The Finance Minister, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, moderator. Once again, a good morning, those of you who have just joined. I must say I thank the three panelists for their comments in very critical areas, and I largely agree with some of their insights and suggestions. Let me start with, I think it's Mavunga's comments, who's from the mining sector. I hope I got your name right. There was a bit of echo, so I was not getting the audio quite well there. You raised the issue of the exchange rate and the auction, which has created, you agree that it has generated a lot of stability, has contributed to that stability that we've seen in the macroeconomic front on the exchange rate, but also you think that it has created arbitrage opportunities as well, which then take away from some of the good things that the auction has afforded us as an economy. Well, you know, colleagues, if you look at the fundamentals for the exchange rate, the fundamentals are actually quite good. Let me just go through them quickly. One, let's just look at the inflation differential. Year-on-year inflation, even month-on-month, between Zimbabwe and its major trading partners. That gap has been narrowing in the last 1 year. If you recall, we used to, we came down from an inflation rate of over 800% in July last year. And here we are now at about 50% year on year. Month on month, if you recall what happened last year, month on month, we're sitting at basically 37%. And now we are down to the order on average of about 3% per month. So clearly there's been a major shift downwards in the inflationary trend and the narrowing of the gap in terms of our trading partners, the inflationary gap. So that's the first variable. The second variable is the state of the balance of payments position. Again, we expect record inflows of diaspora remittances. Exports are performing well relative to imports. The balance of payment position is strong. It is in positive territory. The third variable is the state of the budget deficit, which again is in balance. So the issue is then what's really going on. Now the fourth variable, is the monetary balances, which again are on target. They're within the 20% target. And to supplement that, we have had just an inflow of about $1 billion equivalent in reserves. All that should bolster our currency. So if you analyze all the key variables that drive an exchange rate, normally they are all aligned and they are all very positive. Now, so what then is going on? I think really this is an issue of just fine-tuning the auction system. It's not about the exchange rate not being supported by strong fundamentals, no. It's about just fine-tuning the auction system. The governor has made it very clear that he wants to close the supply gap that has emerged from those who have been allocated forex in the auction and actually paying them. He said the delays in the gap, and we as Treasury will support the central bank in closing that gap. I can assure you, we will do that. So that's one. And also, you saw the recent proposal, or rather decision by the Monetary Policy Committee from the governor's statement, where they want to allow small traders of those who need the US dollars, $50 a week, to be able to access this $50 a week from the Bureau de Changes who have been integrated into our monetary system, our forex management system. So that's something that's in addition to what we already have in the auction. All of that is fine-tuning. So what's really needed in our view is just to fine-tune certain aspects of the auction, but otherwise the fundamentals for the stable currency are in place. Of course, Mavunga, you welcome the support to the gold sector. We are very serious about this. We want to make sure that this sector is supported because they contribute so much to our foreign currency earnings. And moving on to Chennai, you highlighted 3 areas that are critical, focusing on resilience. The need to focus on the informal sector, the health sector, and making sure these SDRs continue to support the reserves accumulation element. On resilience, you are spot on. That's exactly what we've been doing. In fact, if you look at the war cry from my budget strategy paper for 2022, we're saying a reinforcing resilience and sustainable economic recovery. That word resilience is critical. And I agree with you that part of it involves capacitating learners to be able to learn in an environment that is, afflicted by COVID. We must invest in the platforms that allow them to learn, so that we can now bridge that gap that is, occurring. The digital divide is creating a gap between those who have and those who have not. Those who have not can access education material easily. So in your outcries that we need to invest in this, and I agree with you. That's what we are doing. We're not talking about support for the education sector, which was hard bricks and mortar infrastructure built in schools, but also supported by the adequate infrastructure to allow learners to access material. Then on the informal sector, basically the small scale minor sector is largely informal. So in a sense, the SDRs are supporting that. But I think we're making a broader point that ordinarily, let's have a robust strategy for supporting the informal sector. And we, as government, we always believe that one way to do that really is to make sure that there is adequate infrastructure for use by the informal sector. There's adequate support for that sector. For example, just simply building stalls where the informal sector can operate from, and maybe thinking of other ways to manage their activities during a lockdown requirement. All those things, maybe we just need to reflect further to see how best we support them so they don't go out of business, but rather they remain in business, but observing certain protocols. That's what I understood from your question, but I agree with you. The informal sector is critical, and we have to support it as government by at least giving them the right infrastructure for them to operate from. You emphasize the health sector. We are focused on this. The COVID is about really, make sure that we can get enough vaccines to vaccinate at least the herd immunity level of the population. Then turning on to Fadzwa, again, I really to agree with Chinamo here that really VFX is such a great platform. That's why we as government working with the ZSC and the Securities and Exchange Commission created this platform. Broadly, it's a offshore financial center. And then VFX is one component of that for those who want to go public. The idea is then is to make sure that companies can raise capital through this capital market, but also those that don't wish to raise capital, they just wish to operate from the offshore financial center, are able to do so. And we'll be structuring relationships as a tripartite with other exchanges around the world that will support VFX and really turn it into a Pan-African platform, hopefully then into a world-class platform. And the same applies to the commodity exchange. That again, things may start slow, but I think we'll catch up. It will grow. It should be the right platform for the price discovery process, so that we as government don't have to set prices of commodities. The market should do it. And again, the idea is to structure a global relationship for this exchange to move it to the next level. Yes, Tafadza released a cat out of the bag here regarding maybe a government's intentions of launching a bond. We are working hard on it. We want to list a US dollar bond on VFX soon. I can't give you the exact timetable because the advisors are fine-tuning things. We are looking at, maybe I shouldn't reveal the amount for now, otherwise I've been trouble. People start writing about it. But we want to make sure that we also begin to develop a yield curve, not just for domestic debt, but also for foreign debt on VFX. So we are working on this. Safaza is ahead of me in terms of the licensing of REITs. I thought that he had only licensed one, but he says now he's licensed two, and one is on the way. This is fantastic for supporting our infrastructure sector, is particularly the real estate sector. So it's going well indeed. I think, colleagues, we can see that we as government, working with the private sector and the regulators that fall under us, we're working hard to create these, let me call it the micro institutions that enable and facilitate investment in the private sector, whether it is exchange, whether it is specific instruments. We are working hard at this. Maybe let me add one thing that the panelists didn't talk about, perhaps, the issue about arrears clearance, that we have developed an arrears clearance and debt restructuring strategy as the government. And we are now speaking to various countries to see who could be a sponsor, because we need a sponsor. And once we are successful, we're able to move to the next phase, which is really to tackle those areas with the World Bank and the African Development Bank, the preferred creditors. So we're working hard on that. I think that's really one big piece in the whole reform agenda, arrears clearance, but we are working hard on it. I must say that for now, we've taken the step of beginning to pay token payments to the World Bank and the African Development Bank, and then also the European Investment Bank. We are making those payments to show that we're good debtors. But also we've taken yet another step, which is literally, which we've not done almost in the last 20 years, which is to start paying the Paris Club creditors, the 17 Paris Club bilateral creditors. Again, we've begun making token payments to them as well, whether looking at UK, Italy, Germany, Japan, or US. We've started paying again, because as a country, we ought to be known as good debtors and not bad debtors. Thank you very much.
Certainly. Thank you very much, Minister. We should be known as good debtors and not bad ones. Thank you very much for those responses that were very clear. We have one more player who is going to give us comments briefly and just two questions to the Minister, and he is the Zimbabwe Congress of Trade Union President Peter Mutasa. Mr. Mutasa, please take the virtual podium. So as he comes up, we can all prepare our questions. We'll be moving on to the chat box and give those questions to the Minister, and then we expect a response from him. Mr. Mutasa?
Thank you very much, and thank you, Honorable Minister, for such a good presentation and for always engaging with us, even though we may differ on views here and there. Representing a particular sector, which I believe also I'm speaking on behalf of the majority poor in Zimbabwe. The questions that we have are that, is there real stability? We hear of stability, but is there stability? If we look at the prices, if we look at the exchange rate, and not the auction exchange rate, we don't use that. The majority of us don't use the auction exchange rate. Prices have been going up daily. The exchange rate is now 1:170, 1:180. And that is what affects us when we get in a shock. If we look at the incidence of poverty, from extreme poverty from 29.3% in 2017 and now 49%. And that is a shocking jump that should make every policymaker think twice. Is that reflective of stability? Even on the inflation that we are talking about, Honorable Minister, that inflation is rigged in our view, rigged at the point of collective bargaining. We've destroyed collective bargaining, and the workers are shouldering the burden, or the burden is shouldered by the workers And this is why we are seemingly seeing some drop in inflation. But in actual fact, it is a result of shortchanging the workers in terms of salaries. We are looking at the PDLO, which is around 6,350 for a single person and almost 31,000 for a family of 5. Consumer council basket over 41,000. How much is a teacher earning? How much is a nurse earning? How much is an agriculture worker? When we say agriculture is the mainstay of this economy, an agriculture worker is earning 4,000 RTGS, which is far below the food poverty line itself. So these are the issues, the critical issues that we must be talking about. If you look at the PC's report, 83% vulnerability committee report, 83% of urban dwellers are failing to buy food, and 37% of households are going without food a day. So if someone is to ask us about what was your economic program about or what it achieved, we'll be able to easily point out that it was an economic program that left the majority behind. And it is an economic program that fits squarely in the UNDP typologies of negative economic growth. We are witnessing, Honorable Minister, a ruthless growth, a growth that is only benefiting the rich at the expense of the majority poor and widening inequalities. For us, it's socialism for the rich. If you look at your auction processes, socialism for the rich, arbitrage opportunities for the rich, people getting Forex to buy fuel and sell it in Forex and hold on to the profits in Forex and discharging them at the black market. It is socialism for the rich and brute capitalism for the poor. The poor, especially the workers, are financing almost everything that we are seeing in this economy. If you look at job growth, in our view, it is jobless growth again. We are losing a lot of jobs through retrenchments. We are also seeing loss of jobs in informal economy through deliberate government processes of destroying livelihoods in the informal economy. If you go to what is funding or what is sustaining what we are celebrating now as stability, it's terrible extractive madness. Even chiefs are now complaining, people who have not studied economics, they are seeing that this extractive madness is rendering us into futureless growth, where everything is being extracted without benefit, without beneficiation. If you go around the country, the degradation to the environment is terrible. So we may be celebrating now because we are churning out our chrome to China daily and getting useless amounts that we are getting there. But what about the future? What about the future of those communities and about the future of the future generations of Zimbabwe? Again, UNDP was correct that we can have voiceless growth. So there's no improvement, Honorable Minister, in terms of democracy and social inclusion. There's no social cohesion. We don't want economic policies that are guaranteed by KG6, Amaris, and Chikurubi, Black Boot, men in black boots. We want economic policies that works for all and that are guaranteed by a democratic ownership of the citizens and social cohesion. Unfortunately, that is not happening. All the measures that we are talking about are not measures that are affecting people who are suffering daily. If you look at even those who are severely or moderately food insecure, despite the bumper harvest, we still have 61% of households that are severely or moderately food insecure. It may be an improvement from 2020, 71%, but definitely a negative figure if we look at 2017, which was 52%. So in our view, we need to stop counting these numbers. That means a lot to people who are just to the elites and the people who
Mr. Mutasa, if I can just interrupt you there, please round up 20 seconds.
Thank you. I'm rounding up by saying we need now to start counting people who are dying because of lack of access to health, children who are dropping out of school because their parents cannot pay school fees. Those are the issues that we need to touch on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mutasa. Minister, I know I had said you're going to respond to this, but we have one more speaker. I couldn't identify him in the chat box, but we have Mr. Kurai Mucheza. He is the president of the Confederation of Zimbabwe Industries. Mr. Kucheza, please take the virtual podium, give us your response to the minister's presentation, and offer, and field one or two questions. So in case you're just joining us, you are tuned into today's webinar, which is Zimbabwe's Economic Recovery Path, Reforms, Special Drawing Rights and Priorities. The minister has just given us his presentation. Stakeholders in the economy have also given their response to him. We're just waiting for one more before we open up for questions from the audience. This is presented to you by Zimbabwe Independent in proud partnership with Nedbank.
Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I was saying we have heard the minister and we support his efforts that he has been doing. We are happy with the inflation trend that has been coming down, as he said, from 800 to 50 now. But obviously, we are worried about the month-on-month inflation, which is at 4.2. Is still relatively high. Yes, it has come down from the 30 levels, but at 4.2 is still quite high. In terms of the growth targets that are there and projections, we are quite excited with the 7.8 and obviously other numbers that are coming from the World Bank. But our concerns are at those growth rates, there are certain infrastructures that need to be put in place. One, in terms of electricity. Two, in terms of NRZ. Electricity, if we grow at those rates, compounding over a period of time, I think the efforts that we are putting in terms of solar and these other small power station generations, 50 here, 30 there, 100 there, will not support the growth targets that we are talking about. Our urge to the minister is to accelerate efforts at the Vatoka Gorge. I think that is green energy, and would want him to focus on making that Vatoka Gorge a reality. And also other developments along the Zambezi River. There are others, other sites along the Zambezi River that we can work with the neighboring countries. So that is an effort that we need to be put. In terms of SDRs, we also are in agreement with some of his focus areas where he wants to apply the funds. But we need to caution to say 961 is not a lot of money. And I think in terms of the shopping basket, it might be just too big. We need to focus on high impact areas. If we spread it too thin, we may not achieve much. So we need it to be highly targeted, high impact areas, people that can make it a revolving fund and benefit the broader economy. The question that I want also to raise is, now that there is this reserve that can support the currency, we don't know how. As exporters, there is an issue of these retention levels. These are quite punitive. We consider it as a tax, considering also the rate that has been talked about, that has been stuck at 85. So when you compound the two, and also the paying of income tax in US dollars, we feel that exporters are heavily taxed without any incentive to generate more foreign currency. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Honorable Minister, I would like to bring you back to our virtual podium so that you can respond to these few questions.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me all. Let me start with comments from Peter Mtasa, who's always very a strong champion of the vulnerable and our workers. It's always welcome to hear him speak. I must say that Peter Mtasa, we should make more effort to make our tripartite negotiating forum work better, collaborate better. We cannot ourselves as leadership declare that we're not making things work. Let's just try to make it work. So that's what I want us to urge each other there. Then on the issue of stability, look at where we have come from. Things were definitely unstable. That this time last year, with such high inflation of over 800%, surely that's instability. And looking at where we are now, at about 50 year on year, even for the month, that really speaks to improved stability that has occurred. Now, even if you go back and look at the formal market exchange rate, or indeed the informal market or the parallel market exchange rate, and you try to work out volatilities for those two markets, you will find that volatilities are nowhere near where they used to before. And that's how we technically define stability. But coming to issues around extreme poverty, maybe two things. One, in the entirety of this journey of economic reforms, we've not forgotten the poor.
I know the minister has another engagement, but I just want to ask you one question, Minister, before you go. This is from Joseph Peary, one of the participants. He says that, thank you, Minister, for availing yourself for this presentation. My question is as follows. Zimbabwe is focusing on 7.8% GDP growth, and this is double the focus of IMF. How do we explain the difference? Globally, there are a number of fundamentals that point to slowing growth. Amongst this is the moderating commodity consolidation everywhere, given high debt levels in many countries. What will be driving our economic growth? And the minister, if you can also allow me, I've also seen also in the chat box a question around, I can't find it anyway, but a question around the issue with the ZESA and an independent power producer. Talk to us a little bit about that. Your comment. We want to hear what exactly is going on there. And as soon as you respond, we are going to call upon Faith to give us a vote of thanks before you leave this webinar.
Thank you very much. I was continuing to talk there. I didn't realize I was now offline. I was still saying a few comments regarding Peter Mtasa's comments, which is, look, in terms of, then I'll be quicker there. In terms of extreme poverty, that we have a strong social protection program supporting the vulnerable through productive social protection, the Funguza program, presidential input scheme, but also the BEAM program for those who cannot afford to go to school, and then health services for those who can't afford to access health services. We've done a lot. And if you look at the latest ZIMVAC report, Mtasa, for April, it says that if you look at the income per household, last year, at the same time, it was about $33 US. But this year, we're up to $75 US. So clearly, that vulnerability and extreme poverty that we're referring to has ameliorated, and agricultural sector performance is a key part of that. And then on joblessness, I think it's fair to say industry is really doing its best to create additional jobs. The government doesn't create jobs, they create jobs. Our job is to make sure that we create the environment to do so. And I think you are also doing a good job in trying to argue for higher wages all the time for workers, and that's a good thing. So we continue to work on that to make sure that they are properly remunerated. Then from Macheza, maybe the one issue is around Batoka Gorge. That yes, that project is progressing well. As you know, it is a PPP. It is a concessional arrangement, 25-year concession, led by Power China, GE, as well as local project promoters, and they are progressing with the project. It is coming along. But I think that there are other areas that will deliver power very much as around thermal power, as I said earlier. The Wange area should be able to, in the next couple of years, contribute enormously towards our power, our production. And then on SDRs, that we should be careful about not spreading them too thin. I agree with you. And the areas that I talk about are really targeted to make sure that there is high impact. Then on the retention, I've listened. Part of it we listen. I don't have an immediate reaction on that one, on the export retention ratio. It's something that I'll take back and have a conversation with the governor to see in terms of what our thoughts regarding that. But as you know, we have always reviewed this from time to time. Well, you have expressed it as the leader of CZI. We can also say, let's listen and chew the bone over it. Then on, I think, moderator, what I heard, because I lost connection, was two areas. One is what is going to drive global growth. Basically, global growth is going to be driven by the success of the vaccination program. So vaccination program is critical to global growth projections in many of the developed economies, US, Far East, which is China, Europe. So that's important. Number two is additional liquidity into the global economy in the form of SDRs, 650 billion worth of SDRs sloshing around in the global economy. That liquidity, it will partly drive economic growth. And then number three, just the opening up of the global supply chain, processes by the opening up of China, due again to the success of the pandemic containment measures. All of that will drive global growth. For us here, for Zimbabwe specifically, the growth is going to be driven also by the virus containment measures, including our vaccination program, success of that. Number two is climate change. If there's a good season coming, then we are good, and that's what we're projecting. Number three, because of strong growth globally, we expect strong commodity prices, so that will support our mining sector. Then number three, one constraint that affects industry, which is the foreign currency, we've seen really the easing of that through the auction system, and also the banks as well. They're sitting on about 1.9 billion US dollars, and they're able to support their clients in accessing foreign currency. So I think that the stars are aligned for stronger rebound on the global economy, but also aligned for a rebound for the Zimbabwe economy. There's a comment on IPPs, independent power producers in the energy sector. Yes, the framework for IPPs in the renewable energy sector is being finalized. Those of you who work in that sector, that we need basically a model power purchase agreement that improves the credit standing of the off-taker, or rather that reduces the off-taker risk, which is ZETDC. We are working on that. Number two, we need a tariff range that is economic. I'm aware that an economic tariff range in the solar sector is somewhere between 9 to 11 cents per kilowatt hour. We're looking at all of that to see how we can guarantee that economic tariff. And number three is really the currency convertibility for the foreign investors who have brought in their money to invest here. They want to be able to take it out, and they want currency convertibility. So those are the three pillars of a framework to support independent power producers. But at the end of the day, an investor is an investor. They've got their own conditions in terms of the project. They demand whatever they demand, but at least we want to put in place a basic framework, a minimum framework, and that's what we're finalizing. That work is being carried out between the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Energy, and the Reserve Bank. I may have missed a question or two, but that's what I could hear. I'm happy to take one more or whatever before we close.
Okay, thank you very much, Minister. I hear you still have a few minutes with us before Faith comes in. Let me just ask you another question from the audience. The question here is on small scale miners. Isn't there a way of consolidating their activities to harness their controllability? Their operations eventually will affect the nation, even financially, as they affect the infrastructure and development of the nation. We also have another question here. Are you aware that there is serious load shedding right now? Can you also speak on that? Why are we not supporting rooftop solar PV in the residential area, mining to market segments, to deal with the power supply problems? We also have another question here. The economic recovery story for Zimbabwe cannot be fully talked about as long as Zimbabwe is pulling in different directions, and key is trust. We have innumerable stories which raise trust issues with the current administration. What are the strategies Zimbabwe is doing or will do to ensure that we try at best to minimize trust issues so that we have a collective approach to economic recovery in our country? As a nation, we are heavily polarized and pulling in different directions, hence not a team. So in as much as we try, we're unable to do just so much without cohesion. Let me look for one more question, Minister. When will the current exchange rate become a free exchange rate? I'm concerned about the manner in which the gap between the formal rate and informal rate is widening. This is having a negative impact on livelihoods of civil servants, pensioners, majority of workers' earnings are continuously eroded, and this worsens poverty. There is one final question here. Please clarify on the stimulus package. Government records show that there has been funding channeled through stimulus, but industries are saying otherwise. Are industries not telling the truth? I think we can deal with just those questions, Minister.
Thank you very much. Let's quickly dispense with these on the small scale miners, support for them, pulling them. Someone thinks that they might even be a negative. No. I think the small scale miners are a positive force in our economy. I think the issue really is one of regulation, that we as government, we should really tighten our regulation around them. First of all, it's about formalizing them, because if we don't, then we cannot trace where that gold is coming from. And the KYC, know your customer issues, and the gold traceability are now big issues globally. So we have a program for formalizing these small scale miners, and better still, if we're able to support them with equipment and things like that, that just improves the formalization process. And then we can bring to bear better standards for mining and to control environmental degradation. We can even green our gold. So the steps we are taking are really the steps in the right direction, which ought to ameliorate things on some of the fears that you are expressing there. Load shedding, yes, I'm aware of the load shedding at the moment. Look, I would have to consult with the Minister of Energy to find out exactly what the problem is. I don't have that detailed information. It sits with them, or indeed with the ZESA. There is load shedding. I don't know why there's a downturn specifically. It could be a mechanical failure. I'm just not so sure. But you can be sure that they're trying their best to deal with the issue, because reliable energy is critical. Then on, yes, we're all pulling in different directions, but we need to all pull in one direction to achieve economic success. I agree with that. That really the need to always continue to build social cohesion, or indeed political cohesion, is critical for our economic success. And I must say that His Excellency has worked hard at this through the POLAD platform, which seeks to pull together political players, key political players together, to make sure that we can all pull in one direction as we seek to achieve economic success. Hopefully, it can all be supported by others who may not be as participative at the moment, but it's a genuine way to really try to make sure there's political cohesion and which is also linked to social cohesion. Then on the issue of the gap between the exchange rate official and then the power rate. Yeah, this is what we discussed earlier, that we are working on these fine tunings of the auction so that to make sure that this gap doesn't widen and then begin to cause challenges for incomes levels within our economy. I did say that one of the things that has been announced by the MPC, Governor issued a statement, was to allow more buyers from the broad exchanges up to $50 a week, to which are able to access from the broad exchanges, so that we can make sure that those who were excluded from the auction are now included. So it's an inclusive financial inclusion strategy that the MPC, the central bank, has announced, and I think let's take advantage of that as a way to make sure we continue to fine-tune the auction as a source of foreign currency for all. Then on the stimulus package, remember, targeted various areas. First of all, it was agriculture. We have availed adequate resources to the agricultural sector for productive purposes for both summer program in terms of grains, as well as for the winter wheat program. That has been supported quite well, and if you ask them, they are not short of money there. Coming to the manufacturing sector, that again we've supported. You saw the facility from that we arranged jointly with the central bank for the SME sector, 500 million, which is accessed through the banking sector, and then also the about 3 billion medium-term facility, which the central bank has again facilitated working with the Treasury, which can be accessed by the manufacturing sector or industry through the banking sector. And they've been accessing that at a favorable interest rate. So the stimulus package is alive, but of course, its execution doesn't mean that you get money directly from Treasury. We actually, as Treasury, facilitate and make sure that we provide the right guarantees for private sector institutions to then extend that credit. And I've made a commitment that really want to continue supporting, especially the tourism sector, and because we know that it's been hard hit by COVID. So we'll make sure that this sector is well supported. We're not yet ready to cut off that stimulus, which also involves the removal of VAT for services for domestic tourists. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister, for those responses. I would like to acknowledge Zimbabwe Economic Society. They are our proud partners. And at this moment in time, I'd like to call upon the president of the Zimbabwe Economic Society, Mr. Nigel Chanakira, to give us a way forward.
Well, thank you very much to Zim and the Alpha Media Group, our media partners as the Zimbabwe Economic Society. We are grateful, of course, to the Minister for his continued open and frank discussions. And suffice to say, as the Zimbabwe Economic Society, we remain very convinced that we can make a positive contribution from the profession in terms of the reform agenda. And in that light, it's obviously congratulations to the team that is liaising with the IMF, the Minister of Finance being responsible for that additional boost that the Zimbabwe government has now received of that $1 billion fund. And then, of course, its management and, on the way forward with that fund. This is just to indicate to the minister, the governor, that pretty shortly we will be holding the first inaugural summer school for our members. And we hope that in the couple of days that are to come, within the next fortnight or so, we will be holed away somewhere in Zimbabwe discussing these very issues. And we hope that we can count on your participation or any emissaries that you may send through to attend our summer school. And then we hope that we can make contributions on further reforms for our great nation, Zimbabwe. So thank you once again, Minister, the Alpha Media Group, Zim Ind in particular, along with the members of the public that continue to show interest in the economic affairs of Zimbabwe. We are pretty confident that with our contributions as well, we can make a positive impact for the reformation and revival of our great economy. So thank you all and good day. Thank you for your participation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chanakira. The minister gave us his presentation, questions were asked. Before we close, I think it's important for us just to hear final remarks from our panelists, just 60 seconds. I will call upon Tumai Mafunga, the president of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Zimbabwe, and Mr. Kurai Macheza, please be on standby. And Mr. Tumai Mafunga, the podium is yours.
Thank you very much. I think obviously a lot of work needs to be done going forward. The reality is that there are a number of issues that the minister will need to deal with, matters of legacy debt, amongst others. And then also ensuring that we continue to improve the social net, especially on the more vulnerable members of society. However, from our perspective, we stand ready with the various members of our institute to support and also to be guiding hand in terms of creating accountability, particularly regarding how the funds are used. So we do look forward to working with the minister. We will have tough conversations. We will have points of disagreement, but I think it's more to ensure that we are all progressive for the improvement of the country's economic status. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. And you just stuck to your 60 seconds. Thank you very much. Mr. Kurai Macheza, the Confederation of Zimbabwe Industry President. Coming up, Chennai Moyo, can you please be on standby?
Hello? Yes,
can hear
thank
you. Go ahead.
Yes. Obviously, the country, the direction it is taking, it's commendable. But are we there yet? Obviously, no. There are still issues. It is fora like this and the others that will bring our minds together to profile in ideas. And we hope the government, the minister in particular, will continue to listen to the issues that we raise as we chart the best way forward for the country. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Chennai Moyo Mutamba Sere, she is a development economist. Chennai, can you take the virtual podium? As she is coming up, Tafadzwa Chinamo, can you please be on standby?
Thanks, Lynette. So in my 60 seconds, I would say the devil is always in the detail. I'm still not clear on the how, in terms of how we're actually going to start dispersing and using the SDR. It should be reserves before SDRs. Could it be debt before spend as well? And with a clear focus on resilience, I would take every point that was submitted by, I think it's Mutasa from ZCTU. Those are the key economic issues. You know, we're not looking, poverty should not be underdressed using, statistics such as, like the minister was describing, the stability being based on volatility between the two markets. Let's call a spade a spade. We've got 140, 160 in the power market rate, which serves the majority. Let's address that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Tafadzwa Chinamo is the Securities and Exchange Commission of Zimbabwe Chief Executive Officer. Mr. Chinamo, the podium is yours.
Thank you, Lynette. I think I just want to emphasize the point that, look, we all accept that this economy has been through a lot. I think we've been through hyperinflation. And those effects, especially in the financial services sector, are still being felt. So whatever initiative that we come up with, I think we just urge patience that it's going to take time. On our end, on our part, we'll do the best we can to inform and educate the market and create, like the minister said, that enabling environment for us to get out of the situation that we're in. But yes, it's going to be a bumpy road. It's not going to be smooth, but we just urge for patience and I guess focusing on, what's ahead of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that. Now I call upon Faith Zaba. She is the editor of the Zimbabwe Independent. Faith, can you kindly give us a vote of thanks?
Thank you, Lynette. Thank you so much. Good morning. Minister Mthuli, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to make this vote of thanks after this important and insightful discussion. And then, Minister, I was going to ask you, we've received a lot of questions in our inbox. Would want to forward them to you and then publish them next week. If you allow us to do that, we'll be most grateful if we can do that so that all the questions that have been raised can be responded to. Thank you so much. I want to take this opportunity to thank Professor Ncube for leaving many important national issues to join us and explain further government's development plans and reforms. This morning, we also got the opportunity to understand his spending.
Faith, if I can just interrupt you there.
Sure.
Your screen, you need to switch your screen. There seems to be a problem there. You are sideways. Okay, that would, yes, much better.
Yeah, all right. No, that's fine. So sorry about that. It's where I'd put my phone. All right. This morning, we also take this opportunity. We got the opportunity to understand his spending plan of the SDRs, which were released by the IMF recently. As the country's largest circulating business weekly, it is our role to help the country understand what authorities are doing and to request authorities like you, Minister, to make clarifications where we feel Zimbabweans require clearness. You can bank on our ability to reach to the national, African, and global market, Minister, to put across your message. We'll continue to knock on your door whenever we feel that certain policies require clarification. Let me also take this opportunity to extend our gratitude to our sponsor, Nedbank, and to our partner, Zimbabwe Economic Society. I would also wish to thank all our panelists. Thank you so much for your insights and putting government policies to test. And thank you, Minister, again, for explaining and giving emphasis to important issues, such as equities markets, what's happening there, sectoral development, infrastructure development, taxation regime, growth targets, budgets, and trade deficits, and also plans for the social sector. To our panelists, Chenai, my sister, Tumai Mafunga, Kurai Macheza, Tafadzo Chinamo, and Peter Mutasa. Your interventions in this webinar were insightful. So have been your contributions in the Zimbabwe Independence through various ways. We thank you so much for agreeing to be with us this morning. Kurai, we wish you well in your new role as the president of CZI. And to Tafadza, we are grateful for the big role that you have played as head of Zimbabwe's financial markets. And we thank you for always being available for comment whenever we have come knocking. I wish you all the best in your future endeavors. Last but not least, to my sister Lynette, thank you so much for hosting and for guiding the program professionally and asking important questions. Thank you, dear. And then I also want to thank our participants and our viewers on our platforms who joined us in this very exciting discussion. And please join us again next time as we continue to stimulate citizen engagement and debate. We have more exciting webinars lined up. And then I would also just want to say that as Zimbabwe Independent, we'll be introducing new and exciting products on our online platform. We'll also be launching a new Zimbabwe Independent website. This is going to be exciting. And then we're also going to be providing premium products tailor-made for business leaders, for policymakers, for investors, boards of directors. This is our way of contributing to nation building and development. Please do read our publications, and please do subscribe to our publication. If you can download our app on www.digital.alphamedia.co.zw. And then you get your papers in the comfort of your homes, and you get your papers in your offices early in the morning. So thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. May we stay safe, always mask up, and I wish everyone a good day and a good rest of the week. Thank you so much, Minister, for joining us.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Enjoyed the interaction.
On that note, we have come to the end of today's webinar. You know, when the editor speaks, you cannot say anything more, but I'd like to thank the minister. Importantly, he was our a special guest, and he was the one who was talking to us about his plan and responding to many of our questions. Thank you very much to all the panelists, to all the participants, all those who are tuning in and listening to this webinar. Until next time, my name is Lynette Manzini. Goodbye.
Thank you.